Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. There is a lot that we still don't know about the shooter in Georgia who tragically killed 8 people at a massage parlor on Tuesday, but it increasingly seems that the early claims that race was not a motivating factor for the shooter, those claims appear to be falling apart, including based on some new witness testimony given to a South Korean newspaper that has been covering the story. So to catch everybody up, the suspect is a 21-year-old male. He is alive. He was taken into custody on Tuesday after this horrific shooting at a massage parlor in Georgia that left, at last count, 8 dead and 1 injured. And police have had a chance to interview him. This doesn't always happen in these situations where the shooter, either at their own hand or at that of the police, often will end up dead. Not the case here. Police speak to the shooter, and the initial belief by many was this was clearly an anti-Asian hate crime. This was an individual targeting Asian individuals. But then it wasn't so clear. And it could be partially that and partially what they are describing as sex addiction, which I'm hearing incel as someone who's involuntarily celibate. But the point is, I have no interest in prematurely saying it's one thing or the other or neither or both. What I know is that the law enforcement in the U.S. and the American right will often characterize shootings by white men differently than they characterize shootings by non-white men. That we know. And because of that, we're sort of on alert as we hear and try to determine what the motive was here. And there's no question that people often will play coy with terms like terrorist, lone wolf, and these other types of terms. In this case, it's just early. It's a tragedy either way. But we know most of the victims are Asian. Now, yesterday, there was a very strange press conference with some of the police. And I'm going to play a clip for you of Captain Jay Baker of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office saying that the shooter had a bad day and he was at the end of his rope on the day that he killed 8 people. And many people rightly reacting by saying this guy, the guy from the Cherokee Police, Jay Baker, he almost sounds like more sympathetic to the shooter than to the victims in some strange way. Take a look at this video.
The investigators, they interviewed him this morning, and they got that impression that, yes, he understood the gravity of it, and he was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope, and yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did.
Remorseful?
I'm not going to go to, I don't know if he was remorseful or not.
He's a pretty young guy with you.
He was fed up and had a really bad day and killed 8 people. Just kind of strange language for describing what happened. It almost sounds, again, more sympathetic to the shooter than the victims. I think that's the bizarre thing. But okay, maybe race wasn't a factor. We don't know yet. And then maybe not shockingly, after this bizarre press conference, we learn that Jay Baker, the Georgia sheriff's spokesman you heard from there, has previously posted xenophobic COVID shirts on Facebook where he said he loves his shirt, and the shirt is a shirt that says COVID-19 imported virus from China, CHY-NA. So now maybe we're doubting what this guy says. And then we get reporting from the South Korean newspaper Chosun, which interviewed victims and reports that the Atlanta shooter said to a witness, or a witness heard the shooter say, "I'm going to kill all Asians." And we've translated the article from Korean. The reporter is Hwang Ji-yoon. It includes reports of interviews with witnesses and the quote that on the 17th, the Hankuk Ilbo Atlanta quoted an employee a member of the Gold Massage Spa where the shooting took place, and said that the suspect at the time of the crime said that he would, quote, kill all Asians. It is known that this witness, Mr. A, was in the store at the time of the shooting, but managed to evacuate and then gave this information to nearby Korean businesses. So it's becoming harder and harder to believe that a guy saying he's going to kill all Asians wasn't at least partially motivated by race. Here is another clip. In this one, Frank Reynolds, a Cherokee County sheriff, says that this appears to be sexual addiction, not racism. Take a look.
We did interview him last night. He is currently in our facility at the Cherokee County Adult Detention Center. We were able to interview him with the Atlanta Police Department and FBI. He made indicators that he has some issues, potentially sexual addiction, and may have frequented some of these places in the past. But as the chief indicated, it's still early on. We still have a lot of things to process, and so he should be at an arraignment tomorrow at some time early morning to late morning, and we will keep you up to date. We have a press release that Captain Baker has put together available to our media folks. If you don't have that, I think we have some printed copies that he'll be happy to give to you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at the moment.
So are you saying, when you talk to the suspect, he says he has a sexual addiction issue, but I'm sure you asked him, was this racially motivated? Was this racially motivated?
As the chief indicated, it's still early, but the indicators right now are it may not be. It may be targets of opportunity. Again, we believe that he frequented these places in the past and may have been lashing out, and part of that is in your media packet as well.
But the working theory is a sexual addiction issue rather than a racial profile.
During our interviews, we asked that specific question, and that did not appear to be the motive.
We're going to hold all questions till the end, please.
Yes.
Let us get through
Thank you.
the press conference, and then we'll answer any questions.
According to authorities, the suspect intended to also target the pornography industry in Florida before he was apprehended. And again, the statements, there's a claim that the shooter said, I wasn't motivated by race or politics. I was motivated by my addiction to sex. The claims from the witness about I'm here to kill all Asians certainly seem to contradict that. Now, I don't know that it necessarily has to be one or the other. You could have someone who, I guess the term incel is sort of pejorative, but it's an individual frustrated by his celibacy. They're celibate, but they don't want to be celibate. And for a variety of different reasons, they're unable to find relationships with, if you're interested in the opposite sex, as it appears this person was, members of the opposite sex. It could be both. It could be racially motivated and incel motivated, or more one or more the other. So whether or not this was racially motivated, there have been many racially motivated shootings. Whether this one is racially motivated doesn't change that racially motivated shootings are a problem in the United States. Some people immediately said, of course, this is racially motivated, and anyone saying otherwise is lying to you or dishonest. Others have been saying there's no way this is racially motivated and we shouldn't look for that. Even some on the left, in fact, have been saying stuff like that. From what we know so far, there is certainly reason to suspect that race was one of possibly more than one motivation. Let's continue to allow the information to lead us to the answer. I have no political or emotional attachment to it being one or the other. But what we do know is there at least now is a report of the shooter saying, I'm here to kill all Asians. We will see what comes out. We'll see what else we learn about this sheriff spokesperson who posted xenophobic China shirts to Facebook. Every detail continues to just be more and more alarming. We've mentioned previously that Joe Biden came into office, or his first approval rating once in office was the highest initial approval rating of any president in nearly 30 years. In fact, 28 to be exact, dating back to Bill Clinton's first year in the White House in 1993. It is now not just one poll. Yesterday's Politico Morning Consult poll continues to have Joe Biden polling very strongly. Let's take a look at the full scope of the numbers. Right now, Joe Biden with 62% approval, 62% approval. Remember, Donald Trump did not get to 50% approval even once during his entire presidency. The COVID relief bill, once passed, still roughly the same level of support, 72% of Americans supporting the COVID relief bill. 56% of Americans believe Joe Biden is doing a good job on the economy. Typical that Democratic presidents don't poll that well on the economy. That's a longstanding statistical reality. 66% approval for Joe Biden on coronavirus, remaining in that mid to high 60s level. So these are very strong numbers. And seeing Joe Biden's approval on coronavirus stimulus reminded me once again, not a single Republican voted for that bill. Many Republican voters supporting COVID relief. 0 Republican votes in the House of Representatives, 0 Republican votes in the Senate for this COVID relief bill. And so that gets us to the question of whether Republicans need to recalibrate their thinking on voting against something that you have essentially a supermajority of the country wanting, supporting, and needing. The answer may not be yes. And what I mean by that is if Republican no votes in the House and Senate on COVID relief, which is popular, have no consequences in 2022, why would they vote for it? If there is a political case to be made for I voted against the pork and I voted against the, overspending and what about the debt and what about the debt, whatever. If it's not going to affect them in 2022 with their own base, and I remain skeptical that it will, maybe Republicans don't need to recalibrate their votes to be reflective of what their constituents want. I don't know. Given the circumstances, the situation Joe Biden was handed, the hyperpolarization of the country and a party, the Republican Party, that has been feeding a lie to their voters for 2 months that Joe Biden actually won. Given all of that, these are really good numbers. They may not remain. I said before, if Biden doesn't get COVID stimulus done soon, like within, I said, about a week ago, I said within 10 days or 14 days ago, I said within 10 days and it passed last week. If Biden doesn't get it done, it would be a major failure and it will probably tank his approval. He got it done. People are getting cash and they don't care. If you just got $1,400 or $2,800 or whatever, do you care if it happened via budget reconciliation or you got the money because of 60 votes? No, people don't care about that outside of, the political beltway and people who follow politics really closely. And this probably buys Biden 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And then the question becomes, what next? Does the vaccine rollout continue to improve? Because cases are starting to level out, even though we're vaccinating. We have to vaccinate more quickly. We'll have to see what the next thing is for Joe Biden. And by the way, these numbers, 62% approval, etc., Biden has these numbers without even doing a press conference. Fox News and Newsmax and others would have you believe that Joe Biden, not having done a press conference yet, is essentially the biggest scandal since Watergate at this point in time. It's not something that most American people care about. Most American people don't even watch presidential press briefings. However, Joe Biden will be doing one a week from today, Thursday, the 25th. And of course, I will be covering it. The day after Joe Biden's press conference, the 26th, we're doing a one-day membership special. We are blowing out huge discounts. These discounts are not illegal, but they're definitely immoral in some sense. I'm kidding. March 26th, big discount. If you want to be notified about it to get a membership, just get on my newsletter at davidpakman.com. And then next Friday morning, you will be given specific instructions how to sign up for this disgustingly discounted membership. What if you could read 10 books in just one sitting? That's exactly what one of my favorite apps lets you do. It's called Blinkist. And what they do is take thousands of popular nonfiction books. They condense them down into text or audio that you can consume in 15 minutes. Blinkist makes sure that you're getting all of the important core insights from each book. So it's perfect for exploring a book you otherwise wouldn't have time for. If there's a full book you're thinking about buying, you can use Blinkist to get a sample first. Just think how much you can enrich yourself by being able to soak up an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month. and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/David Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video. The David Pakman Show, unbeknownst to many, is actually funded by viewers and listeners who get memberships on my website, joinpakman.com. Not everything is a sales pitch, though. Something you can do absolutely for free is join the discussion at the David Pakman Show subreddit, davidpakman.com/Reddit. Something like, I don't know, it's got to be close to 30,000 of our viewers and listeners now subscribe to the subreddit. A few interesting posts I spotted this morning that I want to point out to you. Our friend the Eggman showed up. He is on the subreddit, and he says, my dream ticket and nightmare ticket in 2024. Al Franken, Anthony Weiner is the progressive dream team, sexual allegations aside. Mike Pence, Mike Pillow 2024 is the nightmare that ruins sleep. The Eggman, of course, signing off with his typical shalom. I'm not so sure about Frankenweiner. Frankenweiner may be a tough sell, I think, strategically. Doesn't mean Al Franken's not a brilliant guy. Doesn't mean Anthony Weiner is not an excellent debater and all of that. I think that's a tough one. And as far as the right goes, my money would be, if you give me an even money bet, is the 2024 ticket Mike Pence and Mike Pillow, Mike Lindell, of course. I say it is not. I'm taking the no bet on that one, but interesting to hear from the Eggman there. User BreadTube Forever posted, what's Tulsi Gabbard up to, you might be asking. It turns out Tulsi was on Fox News comparing cancel culture to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in a Fox News interview. Yes, I don't think Tulsi is doing anything that's surprising to anyone that has been paying attention to Tulsi Gabbard for some time. And then user SMM97 has a tip for listening to the David Pakman Show. Pro-life tip. Listen to the David Pakman Show on 1.3x speed. Concentrated Pakman. Saying increasing the playback speed brings a bit more energy to the broadcast, more info in less time. Sometimes I even go for 1.5 to 1.6x speed. Give it a shot and try it out for yourself. And some people reporting in the comments that they actually listen to the show on 2x speed. You know, I've talked with other podcasters about whether we find it offensive that people speed us up to listen to the episodes more quickly. I really don't. I mean, for some people, listening to shows is something you do sort of like for pleasure. Some people, can you imagine? Some people find it relaxing. I know some people fall asleep to the sound of my voice because it's so, to some, soporific. But I don't, if you're just trying to get information and you have a bunch of podcasts you're listening to, I take no offense to people listening more quickly. I sometimes do that with certain types of content. But if you're just listening for pleasure rather than to cram, like for an exam, then maybe you listen at 1x. And I know sometimes I don't speak that quickly. And so I take no offense whatsoever. Listen at any speed that you want. Just be aware that the show will start sounding like Ben Shapiro's show at about 2x. And that may be triggering to some people. Join the discussion. Join the subreddit. It's free at davidpakman.com/Reddit. Yesterday, during the press briefing of a White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, there was a clarification about Joe Biden's tax plan. When Joe Biden said nobody earning under $400,000 a year will see an increase in taxes, did Joe Biden mean individuals earning up to $400K? Or did Joe Biden mean households earning up to $400K? During yesterday's press briefing, Jen Psaki clarified that it means households. That is different than $400,000 per person. It's $400,000 per household. And within moments on Fox News, right-wing host Charles Payne, as well as Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, were saying, look, we told you Joe Biden is coming for middle-income people. Take a look at this clip.
So then what if we go the exact opposite way? We know taxes were promised and elections have consequences, but I don't think anyone thought that the President Biden was talking about a household making $400,000. I always tell people, Senator, be careful when you pick up your torch and your pitchforks. Sooner or later, you might end up in front of your own house.
The middle-income people of this country are smart enough to know that when they hear a politician or even the President of the United States say that only high-income people, the very wealthiest, are going to pay the tax, they know better. If you go there, you're going to eventually end up paying, taxing middle-income people.
So there are two relevant parts here. First is $400,000 as a household income, is that middle income? That's the first question. The second question is, are these the folks we should be targeting for higher taxes? So when you say $400,000 for a household, that could be two people making $200K each. That could be someone makes $175 and someone makes $25. Could be, $350 and $50. Total $400,000. That puts you in the top 2% of households in the United States. So by definition, you're not in the middle if you're in the top 2%. Now, you could say, well, you're in the middle, like, anything that goes down to the second percentile and up to the 98th counts as middle. And then you've got 2% of people that are poor and 2% of people that are rich. I don't think most people would imagine that the meat of the curve is the middle 98%, for example, or the middle 96%. By definition, if you're in the top 2%, you're not in the middle income. Now, you can go and look at this for yourself. If you go to dqydj.com, you can type in any household income. If you type in 400,000, for example, you will see you're in the 98th percentile. The top, to get into the top 2%, this is 2019 data. To get into the top 2%, you had to make, as a household, $387,000. It's a little higher now, probably because of inflation. It's right around $400,000 a year, puts you in the top 2%. Now, the second part is actually more interesting to me. You can, they're just wrong that 400K is middle income. You're in the top 2%. The more interesting part is, you can absolutely make the case that we should be targeting not people who as individuals might only make $200,000 as part of a $400,000 household. You should be looking at people that are making $5 million a year, $20 million a year, $200 million a year, the billionaires, that there's so much more meat on the bone there that you shouldn't even include $400,000 households right now. Now, that is a valid argument in the sense that you're not denying reality. You're not saying 400K is middle income. No, 400K is still in the top 2%, but you should be targeting the top 1% or the top 0.5% or the top 0.2%. $400,000 is a lot of money in any city, but $400,000 in Manhattan with 3 kids is nowhere near the same as $400,000 as a couple with no kids in Alabama. So you just open this up to more debate potentially. If you make this about 10 million a year and up, or 20 million a year and up, there's no debate in any city. Maybe if you have 1,000 kids, right? But in any city with 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, that's a ton of money anywhere. Maybe you start there. And that is a different discussion and one that certainly could be had. But there's no way to say Biden's coming for the middle class by starting tax increases at $400,000. It's just look at a bell curve. It's not the case. And by the way, there's one other hypocrisy here. Charles Payne and Chuck Grassley talking about middle income people making $400,000, but a $15 minimum wage is too much. That's just another level of how everything is just political posturing. None of this is honest, or they're really that dumb. You decide which it is. I think that they're not honest. We'll have more coverage of this on our Instagram at David Pakman Show, and find my latest pastry haul by following me on Instagram at david.pakman. The number one funding source for the David Pakman Show has been and continues to be membership. And membership is not just a feel-good thing. You get access to the world-famous bonus show every single day just for members, as well as commercial-free audio and video feeds of the show day in and day out. You can sign up for membership very, very quickly at joinpakman.com. That's joinpakman.com. If the normal prices strike you as high, by all means, use the coupon code BETTER21, all one word, all lowercase. Become a member today. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Dan Kovalik, who is a labor and human rights attorney and also author of the book Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. It's great to have you on, Dan.
Yeah, it's great to be here, David. Thank you.
So the reason I'm interested in this is there are certainly a range of views across the political spectrum about this issue of so-called cancel culture and what counts as cancel culture and what doesn't. But even within the left, there is some disagreement as to whether it's taking place, what counts, what should be done. Maybe start by kind of giving us your sense of, relative to the idea that we hear on right-wing media about this as a sort of speech suppression, politically based epidemic that is taking place in media and academia and across the social and cultural areas. How does your position compare to that as a starting point?
Yes, compared to the right-wing position, I think mine is certainly different. First of all, I'm not hysterical about it. I mean, I try to deal with it in a reasoned way. I certainly am concerned about it. I'll just give examples. Like, I'm not concerned about the fact that Pepe Le Pew's not going to be in the next this movie.
Yeah.
That was decided by the producers, and I certainly think that he is a problematic character who basically his only thing he ever did was assault the other skunk. The same thing with the Dr. Seuss issue. I mean, the estate itself, apparently, of Dr. Seuss decided to get rid of these 6 books, which no one ever heard of, and which, were offensive. And I think Dr. Seuss progressed in his thoughts as he got older.
Right.
And that actually is a good segue into what I am concerned about. What would concern me is if all of Dr. Seuss's books were canceled because of his earlier works.
Okay.
The concern I have about cancel culture, particularly on the left, is that it seems to me there's a lack of forgiveness and chance for redemption for people. You make one mistake, and I've seen this, all of us have seen this many times, and that's why people who deny that cancel culture exists, I just think are not being honest. We see many times someone will do something that is offensive or barely offensive or seen by someone as offensive, and they're immediately shut out. People call for them to be fired. Sometimes they'll get fired. That concerns me.
So let's break down that process so that we can maybe even figure out which is the part that concerns you. Because so let's imagine a situation where someone tweets something that we agree is offensive, not related to their work while they are on the weekend. Or, there was this story that John Ronson talks about in his book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, a woman who tweeted something about white versus black people getting AIDS as she stepped onto a flight. And then when she landed, it exploded into an international story and photographers were waiting for her and whatever. Okay, so the thing is said, then there is a public outcry from people who say, this is bad. Sometimes you'll see the public contact the employer of the individual and ask for them to be fired, even if what was said does arguably not directly relate to the person's job. The employer will then sometimes put out a statement. Sometimes they'll say, we are disciplining the person. Sometimes they will fire the person. Now, at every individual level, people tweeting outrage seems to be something that I don't have a problem with people tweeting outrage. people demanding that the person be fired is a question mark for me. And this has been done to me before, in fact, as well, in the sense that certainly calling a business, if you find out the person works somewhere and you're going to say, if this person works for you, I'm not going to be a patron of your business. Certainly something I can't say is wrong to do, although I might disagree with it. And then the firing decision, an employer can decide, as long as they're not discriminating on the basis of protected class, it's no longer good for our business to have this person working for us. So like the pieces all, when you break them down the way I'm doing it, aren't particularly concerning. So like which aspect is it you are most worried about?
Well, first of all, I mean, the context is everything. And I mean, it's one thing if you find out someone is an avowed white supremacist.
Okay.
At night dresses up in a hood and is part of the Ku Klux Klan.
Mhm.
This is a person with bad motives, bad intentions. I think how you deal with that person would be different than someone who is otherwise well-intentioned, who says something inadvertently
Sure.
offensive or does something inadvertently offensive. I think they need to be treated differently. I don't think you should pile on someone, even on social media, who makes a mistake and who says, look, I'm sorry.
Right.
And that happens a lot, right? And usually, even after the I'm sorry, it doesn't end, right? And I certainly don't think you should try to get someone like that fired, except in the most egregious circumstance. I don't see getting someone fired in most circumstances some act of social activism. I see it as something counter to solidarity with your fellow workers, with your fellow comrades many times. And this concerns me greatly, especially in the academy now. And I talk about this in my book. I think a lot of people don't understand that the academy has gone through a huge transformation in recent decades, from tenured professors on the most part to now adjunct professors. Most professors now are adjunct. What does that mean? It means they don't have tenure. They have no job security. They get paid poverty wages. I'm an adjunct, for example. I get $3,000 per class I teach at the law school. I may teach 50 students to pay 40 grand a year to attend it, right? And I get $3 grand for the whole class and can be fired mid-semester. I have not, I'm, basically a glorified, gig worker.
Right. Yeah. And I've taught adjunct as well at Boston College and have had a similar experience.
And to call lightly, and I think many times it's lightly, for someone like that to be fired is kicking down. It's not punching up. It's not fighting. You're not taking on the man. In fact,
I agree with you.
Is uniting with the man, right? The administrators who make a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not over $1 million, against these lowly adjuncts. And you see this a lot.
A woman named Amy Siskind, a Democratic activist, tried to get me fired from Boston College because I responded to a tweet of hers saying that the 2020 nominee, or maybe it was even 2020, shouldn't be white or a man. And I said, that seems to me to be wrong, to disqualify someone on the basis of sex or race. And she tried to get me fired from Boston College, and that's wrong. But what I'm hearing from you is more that you just think sometimes these tools are wielded when they shouldn't be. Like there's more egregious and less egregious cases. And sometimes you just think the action doesn't rise to warranting a call to be fired, for example.
I think it would be a rare case where that would be legitimate. Let me put it that way. But I do think, there's something that people now refer to, the Overton window.
Yes.
You've probably heard that there is a line. There are lines of demarcation. Again, I think if someone is an avowed racist, an avowed white supremacist, particularly in a sensitive position of power, I think it's legitimate to call that person out publicly and with their employer.
But who gets to decide what rises to what level and if the position is sensitive?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think obviously it's up to the individual who's doing the attempted canceling, if we want to say that,
Okay.
has to use some judgment. But I think giving what I'm illustrating is that you would do this very rarely. There's, not that many. There are obviously avowed white supremacists, but most of the people we come in contact with on a daily basis are not that, and most of the people that are being canceled are not that. In fact, the irony is to calling someone a racist or a sexist is only damaging to people who don't want to be racist or sexist, right? I mean, if you're an avowed racist, that's a compliment, I guess.
So what would be an example of someone who was called a racist and then fired, but what they said was just a lapse in judgment and really they shouldn't have been?
Okay, well, I'll give an example from my book and why I wrote the book, because of something that happened in Pittsburgh. And
Okay.
and this was not someone who was fired, but in a way it was even greater than being fired. So in Pittsburgh, we have this peace and justice group called the Thomas Merton Center, and it was founded 50 years ago, co-founded by someone named Molly Rush, a longtime peace activist, and also someone who's advocated for economic and racial justice. During the George Floyd protest of last summer, she posted on Facebook, reposted, like someone had posted it, and she just hit share, which many of us do,
Yep.
without thinking. She posted this meme with a picture of Martin Luther King, and it said, "Never rioted, never looted, change the world."
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, people started jumping on her on Facebook, attacking her as a racist, attacking her family who defended her, calling them white trash. She apologized on Facebook publicly, but that wasn't enough. What ended up happening is the Thomas Merton Center, the board of the Thomas Merton Center put out a letter both to all Thomas Merton Center members and publicly on Facebook, saying they could no longer work with Molly Rush.
Yeah.
After 50 years. And this is, so the argument was this meme was racist because you shouldn't tell African Americans how to fight for their liberation, right? If there's some violence that ensues, it's not for us to say. And of course, though, as I point out in my book, if you look at a lot of the violence that happened, a lot of it, probably the vast majority, was not done by African Americans. It was done either by young white anarchists, usually young white males, or young white male right-wingers trying to either inflame the situation or to delegitimize Black Lives Matter. So calling those people out, why is that problematic? In fact, in Portland, as I mentioned, there were newspaper articles that quoted people from Black Lives Matter and from the NAACP saying that the violence that took place night after night in Portland at around midnight and later had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. This is something else. This was, again, young white people who were anarchists or whatever they were, who decided they wanted to do what they wanted to do, which was attack the federal courthouse night after night.
I think this is a great example. I mean, listen, if this example is as you describe it, and I have no reason to doubt it, I'm just saying what I know about it is what you're telling me.
Exactly. This
would be one where I agree. This sounds like the wrong solution. But I guess where I worry is that in a country of 331 million people, there's examples of everything. Every good company that's a big company is going to have 100 or 1,000 customer experiences that sound terrible, but they represent very little in the scope of how the company deals with customers, as an example. I worry that this is being called an epidemic when I will grant that in a country of 331 million, the example just you gave me sounds terrible. It sounds completely counterproductive to the goals of me as a person on the left, for example. And I'm with you if the details are as described. I just don't see the epidemic. And individually, it sounds like you certainly defend the people, the right of people to express their distaste on social media, right? Like you and I are on the same page there.
Yes, absolutely.
And you certainly defend the right of individuals to tell a company, I won't do business with you because of this. Whether they're right or wrong, you defend the right that they have to do that.
Well, certainly consumers have that right. They certainly have that legal right. They should.
Yeah.
Now, again, as a matter of discretion,
Sure.
whether or a matter of conscience, whether they should do it, that's another question. But
Right.
obviously, people have the legal right to do that.
And then businesses, as businesses that exist, some are regulated in certain ways and some are others. As long as they're not breaking any laws, they can also decide having a certain employee is bad for us and it could hurt profits or whatever. We don't want this employee working for us. That you agree with?
Yes, of course.
So it sounds like really it's the sometimes overbearing activation of these tactics that you're concerned about.
Well, yes. And again, I never use the word epidemic in my book or when I talk about this.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't use that. But I do think it is, I think it is a frequently used tactic against people, particularly in the academy. The academy is really soaked in this stuff.
Let's pause our conversation there with Daniel Kovalik, author of Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. The full interview will be on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel at youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. The David Pakman Show is audience-supported media, and you can contribute any amount you want on Patreon, as little as $1 per month. Plus, you can get the daily bonus show, world famous at this point, and the daily commercial-free TV show by making those pledges at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. This is audience-supported media. We depend on the support of our viewers and listeners. Whether you listen to the podcast, watch on YouTube, or watch us on TV, or even listen on the radio, patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Fox News propagandist Tucker Carlson is really playing up this Fox News crisis at the border story. Of course, the crisis at the border started 3 days after Joe Biden took office. It's amazing how quickly he was able to start a crisis at the border, and Fox News has really been playing this up, and this is just a perfect red meat issue for Tucker Carlson. And last night, Tucker did a segment on his show arguing that the country suddenly is too crowded and that crowded countries are unhappy countries. Let's take a listen to Tucker Carlson.
Has there ever been an administration this reckless and destructive? What's happening on the border tonight will change this country forever. A lot of things won't. This will, and you should know that. Unlike other disasters, mass illegal immigration is permanent. No one ever really gets sent home. Over the past 30 years, the population of the United States has exploded by nearly 100 million people, mostly due to immigration. Were you even aware that that happened? You're not supposed to say a word about it, as every year the United States gets steadily more jammed with people and at the same time more chaotic and less cohesive. As the open spaces shrink, as nature itself recedes in the face of yet another strip mall or apartment complex or fast food outlet to serve the new people. This is becoming a crowded country, and crowded countries are ugly, unhappy countries. Why are we letting that happen?
So there are about 5 layers of things to talk about here. And I really hope that these segments are instructive. I think these are great because we start with just like a cartoonish or wacky thing from right-wing media, which I think interests a lot of people. But then we actually look at the data behind a lot of these things, and hopefully we come out with a better understanding of how the world works. First of all is just the political posturing and the hypocrisy. Why do this segment 56 days into Joe Biden's presidency, but you never did it during Donald Trump's presidency, given that if the issue is the country being crowded, during the time that Donald Trump was in office, the U.S. population increased by 6 to 7 million people. And Tucker said nothing about the country being too crowded. And yet, during Joe Biden's 50-something days in office, during which the U.S. population probably increased by about 100,000 people, all of a sudden now the country is just stuffed full of people. It's too crowded. The answer as to why he didn't do it then and he's doing it now is because he only cares about this issue when a Democrat is president. That's very simple. Number 2, Tucker often focuses on what he considers the tragedy of cities, which I guess he believes are sort of war zone hellscapes. But the truth is that the U.S. is large cities surrounded by gigantic areas with very few or almost no people in many states. And in fact, if you actually rank countries by overall population density, the U.S., I think this will shock many of you, the U.S. is 145th in the world in population density. We are right behind Mozambique and Venezuela and the Faroe Islands in population density, but just ahead of Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, and Estonia in population density. Yes, our population density is lower than that of the Faroe Islands. So it's also not crowded. Many cities are, but people are choosing to live there. And if it became too uncomfortable to live in those cities, there's plenty of open space that people can find. And if Tucker's looking for open space, certainly there's plenty for him as well. Now, then he gets to happiness. In terms of happiness, I have studied, in fact, my master's, here we go, my master's, not really dissertation, but one of my final master's papers was on happiness correlations. And there is no evidence that population density correlates with happiness. However, a lot of economic factors do. And people can be happy in cities or in suburbs or in rural areas, but it really depends on having a job, economic stability, social connections, access to health care, which is part of being able to sort of determine what you want to do in life. And then lastly, population growth in the United States is really slow right now. The population grew at the slowest rate in 120 years between 2019 and 2020, just 0.35%. So this is another fake scandal where Tucker and Fox and Newsmax and others, they want you to think that the immigration crisis suddenly is so bad that the country is now crowded. By no measure is the United States crowded. But then here's the additional layer of irony. The real population concern is not about, oh, it's too crowded, there's no room. The real population concern is not immigrants are flooding the country. No, it's none of that. The population concern is climate change and sustainability. The most science-based concern about, you could say world population or U.S. population, is energy consumption and resource depletion. And that's the one that Tucker doesn't actually care about. He at least doesn't talk about it. And he ridicules climate science, and he ridicules those who are concerned about resource use in the United States. And what was notably absent from that rant, a fact-free rant, a propagandistic rant, was the real concern about, listen, at a certain point, what are we doing to the natural resources of our planet? What are we doing in terms of emissions? What are we doing in terms of all of these other things if the world population continues increasing at the current pace? Now, this ignores all sorts of population dynamics and theories. You've got Thomas Malthus, and there's all this different literature about this that's out there. Certainly it's beyond Tucker's segment, but the point is, if you want to have a real conversation about the impacts of an indefinitely increasing population, it's a climate change conversation. It's an environmentalism conversation. It's a sustainability conversation. You're not going to find that on Tucker's show anytime soon. That I can assure you. Hey, I think this is exciting. The David Pakman Show is hiring. We have a small team, and we very rarely have open positions. I get emails all the time from people wanting to intern or work part-time or offering their services in different ways. And we essentially are almost never hiring. We are, is it lucky, blessed, fortunate that many of our employees stay a really long time. And we have a position that is available, and I want to tell you about it in case you want to apply or you know somebody that might want to apply. I will tell you at the end of this segment how to express interest. And if you do anything outside of what I'm saying to express interest, we're unfortunately going to have to ignore it because We have to set some guidelines and create some structure here. So this is a position that is remote. You can be anywhere for this position. But that being said, we mostly are working on Eastern U.S. Time zone. All right. This is a multidisciplinary position that includes social media and writing. It includes video editing. It includes publishing of content. And yes, it includes some sales. No cold calling people on the phone. But yes, interacting with possible advertisers and brands via email. So I think the easiest way to explain this position would be to tell you kind of like what a typical day would look like. The typical day would start with making a bunch of social media content and scheduling posts, maybe for that day, maybe for the weekend. This includes to our Instagram. This includes Twitter. This includes Facebook, TikTok, etc., and other platforms we're going to expand to. So first piece of it would be working with the team to figure out what did well yesterday on YouTube. Let's amplify some of that stuff. What funny memes do we have on Reddit, etc. All right, that's piece one of the day. Second part of the day, we are looking very strongly at launching a second YouTube channel. We have so much live stream content right now that there's lots of things that happen on live streams that would be very clippable as individual clips. But our main YouTube channel is essentially full with the clips from the podcast and interviews and this type of thing. So the ideal person would be able to, understanding the culture of the show and what's interesting and what's funny, go through the previous day's live stream and pick out a handful of moments, either live calls or reviews of clips or whatever the case may be, that would be good standalone clips for this second YouTube channel, working under the tutelage of producer Pat, cutting these, titling them, understanding metadata, thumbnails, clickbait titles. Obviously, we will teach you clickbait titles, and managing this potential second YouTube channel. Very good. That's part two. So we've got social media and this new second channel we are thinking of. Part three is working under the tutelage of producer and business development mastermind Noah to do some sales outreach. And this includes, some people may know this, some people may not. We do ad sales, not just for the David Pakman Show, but also for other shows. We are almost, in a sense, an ad agency. And we want to expand that. So working under the tutelage of Noah, you would learn how do we grow our list of shows on which we place sponsors? How do we make initial contact with sponsors? And hopefully you would get to the point of negotiating your own deals as well. That would be part three of the job. And then I guess those are the three main parts. And then the other thing would be also learning the technical production of the show. How is the show carried out on a daily basis such that if we were to have an illness, like, for example, when I had my appendectomy, well, Pat filled in for me, but you wouldn't be expected to fill in for me. But what if Pat was out? What if we had to, so whatever? You would essentially learn to be a backup producer for the show as well. So this, for the right person, would be full-time. It also may start as part-time, and that would be absolutely fine. It would eventually be a full-time job with benefits. The key things are less about technical know-how. We've learned that we can really teach people all of the tech skills. What we can't teach is being a really good writer and written communicator. We can't teach go get 'em type attitude and people being go-getters. We can't necessarily teach, working well in a fast-paced environment, working on 4 or 5 different things each day. So those are really the big things. We are setting a requirement that you either have to have a college degree already or be in your last semester right now. And that is for a number of different reasons and to reduce certain complications. If you want to apply, we have a formal job description that I can send. You can inquire with a letter of interest and resume or without one, just asking for the position description. The only way to send inquiries about this job is info@davidpakman.com. And please make the subject of your email job opening. Okay. In the email, please confirm that you either have a college degree or are in your last semester. tell me a little bit about meeting those requirements, being a good written communicator, working well in teams, working well in a fast-paced environment, etc. And we are going to, we anticipate, I mentioned this on the stream yesterday, we're already getting a lot of interest. So we anticipate a lot of interest, and it's very, very exciting. The team is growing. We are growing content. We are growing a lot of different things. All right. I've said way too much. I've gone on for a long time, but hopefully that gives you a sense of what's going on. And info@davidpakman.com is the one and only place to inquire. No voicemails, no visits to producer Pat's apartment, none of that. All right. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. This voicemail is very interesting in terms of what it suggests could become the dividing line between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated in the future. Take a listen to this.
Hey there, David. This is Lance calling from San Jose. Listening to your show today, when you're talking about Republican reluctance to get the vaccine to whatever, deny COVID or to own the libs, I have a crazy prediction for probably later this year that COVID deaths will have to be reported based on red COVID deaths and blue COVID deaths, or Trump supporter COVID deaths and Trump non-supporter. I mean, really, if they're really going to not get the vaccine, oh boy. I guess stay away from Alabama and places like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, you're never really going to be able to say red or blue COVID deaths in the sense that we won't know the political orientation of those who continue dying even after the vaccines are widely available. And you can't really go by state because, you know, a Texas COVID death could be some liberal in Austin, or it could be, you know, what, you're not going to know that. But the point is a good one. Even if we won't know for sure, if the most anti-vaccine group in the United States, the two most anti-vaccine groups are Republican men and Trump supporters, you at a certain point will have a significantly higher degree of protection from the virus among non-Trump supporters and non-Republicans. And it could well be the case that in a year or whenever vaccines are widely available, maybe we already have a booster that accounts for the variants. The group that will be disproportionately unvaccinated may well be Republicans, right-wingers, and Trump supporters. And you could see a situation in the U.S. where like 80% of the deaths, 85% of the deaths are right-wingers. That certainly could be the case if the anti-vax movement is going to continue on COVID. Remember, other anti-vax, like measles, has left and right-wing anti-vaxxerism. On COVID, the anti-vaxxerism is far more on the right than the left. You could indeed start to see that split. And I don't want anybody to die. I don't want anybody to get sick, even if they're ignorant anti-vax Republicans. So I would take no pleasure in that. Let's just hope people realize the importance of getting vaccinated. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. Fox News is claiming that reports about the Georgia Trump phone calls were wrong, and that now everybody is having to retract the stories on them. That's not what's going on. I'll explain the story to you on the bonus show. We will also talk about, you know, for all the discussion of the regular minimum wage, the tipped minimum wage has been just over $2 an hour for decades, and it is not getting a lot of discussion in the minimum wage discussions. And then lastly, the FCC is cracking down on robocalls with record fines. Will this make a difference? I have some robocall stories to tell as well. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Get instant access to the bonus show by becoming a member at joinpakman.com. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Blinkist is the app that helps you become a more well-rounded person by letting you read or listen to an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. You can try it for free and get 25% off a subscription by going to Blinkist.com/David Pakman.